Imagine a world where the treatment of the dead continues not out of compassion, but for greed. A billionaire dies, but his doctor doesn't stop. Why? What if I told you that a doctor continued to treat his billionaire patient after his death, all for one thing: money? Sounds unbelievable, right? Well, that's exactly what happened. The doctor's shocking actions went far beyond what anyone could imagine. But what truly shocked the world wasn't just the doctor's greed, it was the mysterious twist that followed. In this video, we're diving into the story of a doctor whose thirst for wealth led him to make one of the most controversial decisions in medical history. You'll learn about the shocking aftermath of a billionaire's death, the dark side of medical ethics, and how the world responded to this unbelievable story. Trust me, you won't want to miss the jaw-dropping revelations coming up. Stay with us till the end, because what happens next might just change the way you look at life, death, and the power of money. Welcome to Craze TV, where we uncover the most shocking and unbelievable stories. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story that will leave you speechless. He was a man whose name echoed in every corner of the world, a billionaire whose wealth seemed limitless. Known for his brilliant mind and ruthless business strategies, Evan Thornton had built an empire from the ground up. A self-made mogul, he had turned a small tech startup into a global force, making him one of the wealthiest men on the planet. His fortune reached into the billions, and his influence spread across industries from technology to real estate to healthcare. But what made Evan truly powerful wasn't just his money, it was his vision. People listened when he spoke, not just because of his wealth, but because of the innovation he brought to the table. He was a disruptor, constantly changing the game in whatever field he touched. It wasn't just about making money for him, it was about leaving a legacy that would last forever. Now, let's talk about the man who had been by his side for years, Dr. Robert Hayes. A renowned physician with an impeccable track record, Dr. Hayes was known for his ability to heal even the most complex cases. He had gained a reputation as a medical genius trusted by the elite. His skills were unmatched, and that's what caught Evan's attention years ago. The relationship between Dr. Hayes and Evan wasn't just professional, it was personal. They had spent years together, with the doctor overseeing Evan's health, managing his stress, and ensuring his lifestyle choices didn't sabotage his empire. In many ways, the doctor wasn't just a physician to Evan, he was more of a trusted confidant, figure who had access to the billionaire's most intimate worries and secrets. For over a decade, Dr. Hayes had been treating Evan, constantly keeping him in peak physical and mental shape. Their connection went beyond doctor-patient. They were close, almost like old friends. The doctor had seen Evan through multiple health scares, including a near-fatal heart attack, which only cemented their bond. Evan trusted Dr. Hayes with his life, and in return, the doctor ensured his patient stayed at the top of his game. But here's where things start to get complicated. Dr. Hayes had always been respected, admired even. He had built his career on helping the richest and most influential people. But as Evan's health began to deteriorate, the pressure mounted on Dr. Hayes to maintain his reputation and keep the billionaire alive at any cost. Little did anyone know this pressure would drive him to make a decision that would change everything. It was an ordinary Thursday morning when the news broke: Evan Thornton had passed away. He was 58. A sudden and unexpected heart attack, the doctor said. The very thing that many had feared would one day catch up to him finally did. For someone whose life was built on control and precision, it seemed almost cruel that a simple, silent failure of his heart would be the end. Was it expected? Well, yes and no. While Evan had faced serious health challenges in the past, especially after his heart attack 5 years ago, he had seemed to be in better shape lately. He had been working out, taking the right supplements, and his stress levels were under control, at least. That's what his doctor, Dr. Hayes, had told the public. Everyone believed Evan would live for many more years, given his resources and the top-tier healthcare he had access to. But then, that Thursday morning, the world received the shocking news. The media jumped on it, immediately flooding the news with updates. Billionaire tech mogul dead at 58. Shockwaves rippled through the business world, and headlines blared across every major platform. Tributes poured in from around the world, politicians, celebrities, fellow billionaires, all expressing their disbelief. But it wasn't just the loss of a business titan that shocked everyone. There was something off about the way the news was unfolding. The public, still in shock, began to notice something odd. Dr. Hayes had made a very public statement early on, and rather than expressing grief, he focused on how much Evan had meant to the industry and his work. There was no mention of personal loss, no sign of deep sorrow. Instead, the doctor spoke as though he had just lost a business partner. No tears, no tremor in his voice, just cold professionalism. This caught the media's attention. The public wondered, why was the doctor so composed? It was strange. After all, they had been so close. People expected emotion, human vulnerability. But all they got was the smooth, polished statement of a man who had dealt with the death of a business associate, not a lifelong friend. Even more bizarre was the way Dr. Hayes handled the funeral arrangements. While other high-profile figures were scrambling to give their eulogies, Dr. Hayes made arrangements quietly, as if the event were a mere formality. He insisted on keeping things low-key away from the media spotlight. A few close friends, family, and business partners attended, but there was little public recognition of the man's true legacy. It was almost as if Dr. Hayes wanted to keep it that way, and that in itself raised eyebrows. People began to question his behavior. Was this just another symptom of his professional detachment? Or was there something more behind the doctor's cold exterior? What were his true feelings about Evan's death, and more importantly, what did it mean for the future? Little did anyone know, this was just the beginning of an even stranger and more shocking turn of events. Just when everyone thought the story was over, unimaginable happened. Despite Evan Thornton's death being confirmed, Dr. Hayes decided to continue treating him. Yes, you heard that right. A doctor who had watched his patient die kept the treatment going. The world had seen him at the funeral composed and distant, but no one knew the true reason behind his behavior. Why would a doctor continue treatment for a dead man? At first, it seemed almost too bizarre to be real. But the more people dug into the situation, the more strange details emerged. Dr. Hayes, with his years of medical expertise, had a clear understanding that the human body doesn't function once the heart stops beating. So what was he doing? Was there something he was hiding? It didn't take long for rumors to swirl, and theories began to surface. Some believed that Dr. Hayes was simply after financial gain. The money. For a doctor used to working with billionaires, the stakes were high. There was talk that Evan Thornton's estate had promised to fund groundbreaking research, medical advancements that could change the world. But only if Dr. Hayes could keep the billionaire's body alive, at least on paper. The idea was that Evan's vast fortune would go toward medical research, but the terms were unclear, and the doctor's role in that process seemed oddly centered on the continuation of treatment even after death. Well, was it really just about money? As investigators probed deeper, it became clear that there was more at play. The true nature of the treatment was far from what anyone could imagine. Dr. Hayes had been experimenting with cutting-edge medical technology, something so advanced it was still in its experimental phase. Rumors began to spread about cryonics, the controversial practice of freezing bodies in hopes of reviving them in the future. Was Dr. Hayes attempting something like this? Or was he diving into even darker territory? Could he be involved in something more sinister? Perhaps he was trying to unlock the secrets of immortality itself, playing with the very fabric of life and death. The bizarre procedures, the strange medications, and the isolation of the billionaire's body were all being done in secrecy. Dr. Hayes seemed wasn't merely trying to preserve Evan's life, he was trying to preserve something more, the secret to eternal life. But why was Dr. Hayes truly obsessed with unlocking the future of medicine? Or was there something even darker brewing beneath the surface? The idea of immortality, the promise of riches beyond imagination, and the power to play God itself. Was that what truly drove him to continue treating a dead man? Or was there something even more shocking that no one had yet uncovered? As the world watched in disbelief, it was becoming increasingly clear that Dr. Hayes was not just trying to save his patient, he was diving into a world of moral ambiguity, questioning the very line between life and death, and perhaps something far worse. The moment news broke that Dr. Hayes was continuing treatment on a dead man, the world was in uproar. The media frenzy exploded. Headlines screamed in disbelief, "Doctor treats dead billionaire. Is this science or madness?" News outlets across the globe couldn't get enough of the story. It was the kind of tale that gripped everyone's attention, the bizarre actions of a renowned doctor, continuing to treat a man who had already passed. It was a story that begged for answers, but no one had any. Public reaction was swift and intense. Ethical debates raged across social media, in newsrooms, and in coffee shops everywhere. Was Dr. Hayes a genius pushing the boundaries of science, or was he a madman playing with death? People were divided. Some argued that the doctor had gone too far, violating every medical code and ethical guideline. Others, particularly those from the medical community, defended him, suggesting he was just pursuing new frontiers of science, exploring uncharted territories in medicine that could one day change the world. But despite the polarized reactions, one thing was certain. Most people were outraged. How could a doctor, someone who swore an oath to preserve life, act so callously? Continuing treatment on a dead body seemed like the ultimate violation of trust, not only between doctor and patient, but between the medical profession and the public. The backlash was immediate, with many demanding that Dr. Hayes face the consequences of his actions. As the public clamored for answers, legal and medical authorities began to take notice. Investigations were launched, and it wasn't long before Dr. Hayes found himself under intense scrutiny. Did he lose his medical license? The medical board, once loyal to him, found itself forced to address the growing scandal. The accusations were serious conduct unbecoming of a physician, violating fundamental ethical standards, and even possibly breaking the law. Dr. Hayes was called in for questioning, but he remained defiant. He claimed that his actions were in pursuit of groundbreaking scientific research, that he was not trying to profit off the dead, but rather pushing the boundaries of what medicine could achieve. Still, his critics weren't convinced, and in the eyes of the law, it didn't matter whether his intentions were noble. What mattered was that Dr. Hayes had ignored the fundamental tenets of medical practice. Did he face legal consequences? The answer was yes eventually. Charges of malpractice were filed, and the public outrage over his actions made it almost impossible for him to avoid legal repercussions. His once sterling reputation was now tarnished, and he faced an uphill battle to clear his name. But even as the legal proceedings dragged on, there were those who still supported him. A small group of scientific supporters and medical innovators rallied behind Dr. Hayes, arguing that he was a pioneer, a man willing to take risks in order to unlock the secrets of human longevity. They believed that his controversial actions might one day be seen as a spark for a revolution in medicine, where the line between life and death would no longer be so clear. For many, however, this support only deepened the divide. The world was no longer just shocked by Dr. Hayes' decision, it was deeply divided over what was right and wrong. Was he a visionary, or had he crossed a line that no doctor should ever consider crossing? The fallout was far from over, and no one knew where this strange saga would lead next. Just when it seemed like the story couldn't get any stranger, the unthinkable happened. As the investigation into Dr. Hayes continued, a discovery was made that would send shockwaves through the world. It wasn't just that the doctor had been continuing treatment on a dead body. It was what had happened during the treatment that would change everything. It began with small, unexplained occurrences at the lab where Dr. Hayes had been conducting his controversial procedures. Staff members reported strange noises, unexplained power surges, and odd incidents where machines would malfunction, only to start working again moments later. But the real bombshell came when one of Dr. Hayes's assistants stumbled upon something in the doctor's notes, something that was never meant to be seen. The notes revealed that Dr. Hayes had been experimenting with a secret technique, a blend of cutting-edge cryonics technology mixed with experimental life-sustaining methods that went beyond mere preservation. This wasn't just about keeping the billionaire's body in a state of suspended animation. No, Dr. Hayes had been attempting to bring Evan Thornton back to life. The doctor had believed that with the right combination of treatments, he could reverse the damage caused by death, essentially rebooting the body. The world had assumed Evan was dead, but Dr. Hayes was attempting the impossible, to defy death itself. It was a dangerous and reckless gamble, and it wasn't long before the unintended consequences of these experiments began to surface. People close to the doctor reported bizarre behavior. One assistant claimed to have seen Evan's body twitch during one of the procedures. Another reported a faint pulse, the most minute sign of life. But it was too little to call it a miracle, and far too much to be ignored. Then, the unexplainable started happening. Some said they could feel Evan Thornton's presence in the room. His influence seemed to loom over the project, even though his body had been cold for weeks. Was it possible that something more than science was at play here? Could the billionaire's influence still be present, somehow pushing his doctor to continue the work? In a series of strange incidents, Dr. Hayes began receiving cryptic messages from Evan. No one could prove who was sending them, but they appeared on Dr. Hayes's devices in the form of mysterious emails and texts. The messages included private business plans, coded phrases only Evan would have known. It was as though the billionaire was still alive, somehow aware of everything that was happening, even from beyond the grave. Was this the work of a man obsessed with his legacy, determined to return at any cost? Or was there a darker, even more twisted conspiracy at play? Dr. Hayes had been operating in secrecy, and many began to wonder whether he had been manipulated all along. Some whispered that Evan Thornton had been planning something much larger than just a business empire, something that would ensure his power lived on forever. Was Dr. Hayes just a pawn in a greater, more sinister scheme? As the mystery deepened, the public's reaction turned from shock to fascination. Was this really the dawn of a new era in science? Or was it the beginning of an even darker chapter in the fight between life and death? The line between genius and madness was becoming harder to distinguish, and the world was left questioning everything. The answers were elusive, but one thing was certain. Dr. Hayes' decision to treat a dead man was only the beginning of a story that no one could have predicted. The truth was far more complex, more dangerous, and more chilling than anyone could have imagined. The doctor's actions changed the way we view life, death, and ethics forever. But was it for money, or something more sinister? Dr. Hayes's pursuit of the impossible, defying the very laws of life and death, raised questions that no one could fully answer. Was he simply a man driven by greed, or was there a deeper, darker force at play? In the end, his actions leave us to reflect on the true cost of ambition and the lengths to which people will go to preserve their legacy, their wealth, or their thirst for power. What happens when we push the boundaries of science and morality? And how far is too far when it comes to achieving the impossible? These are questions that will continue to haunt us long after the story ends. But for now, we can only wonder what was really behind Dr. Hayes's shocking decision, and what does it mean for the future of medicine and humanity. If you found this story as shocking as we did, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Craze TV for more unbelievable tales that leave you questioning everything. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. This is not a real story.